Please join me in welcoming ULI Chairman Peter Rummell.
It is a real treat to be here tonight. This is, I'm told, one of the first events to be held here, and it's just terrific. I got a tour this afternoon. Hunter G. and Bert Matthews gave me a tour of this, and it was fairly detailed, and we really got to get a sense of it. And it's an extraordinary place. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. And we then also had a driving tour of, I can't remember the name of the places. We walked through the convention center. We then went to, is it Rolling Mill Hill? Is that right? And which is really interesting and amazing. We then did a tour of the Gulch, which I just don't understand as a real estate developer, but it works. And did a tour of Laurel Garden and some other places. I mean, most cities would kill to have any one of those, and you've got those and others and many more. So it's a testimony to what you've done and what you have. I think from Vanderbilt to healthcare to a startup environment that is obviously next to none, to the celebration of music and the arts in general, you all are on a roll, and it is nice to see. It's interesting. I was going to make this observation this afternoon, I didn't, but you've done a great job of bringing the center city together and some of these outlying places that are now pulling into the center city. The interesting thing to me is that the riverfront is sort of seems to be the last bastion, and for most places, you start, folks, with the easy stuff. You start with the waterfront, and you now are sort of finishing. Finishing may not be the right word, but I'm sure there's a history to it that I don't understand. But it's just interesting that it is, from my perspective, you got it backwards. I don't understand. But all this has contributed to what I've been reading some articles, and it contributes to an article that now calls you Nowville. That's pretty cool. The New York Times said the city remains traditionally southern in its sensibility, which I think the mayor alluded to, but it has taken on the luster of the current. That's high praise, and that is, I'm sure, very well earned, and you've worked hard for it. Nashville has broadened its appeal by building on its core brand, I think, rather than trying to recast its identity. The city is always going to be associated with country music, but you've done a good job. This is the Music City Center, not the Country Music City Center. And you've done a good job of broadening that and moving that forward. And that is it's tricky, hard to do, but important to do. And it's clear that you've spent a lot of time thinking about that. I'm struck by, this is a slight stretch, but I think it's a quick one. I thought a lot about this. Nashville brand reminds me a little bit of the relationship between Orlando and Disney. Disney obviously owned the kids brand, like you own the country music brand. Disney owned the kids brand since the 1940s. Walt himself created Snow White and Bambi and all the other characters that a lot of you know. Some of the people in this room are old enough to remember when Walt himself was on TV every Sunday night. You don't have to raise your hand if you remember that, but that was part of building it. Disneyland opened in 1955. Can you believe that? It was a fortress for 1 to 10-year-olds. Nobody else could touch it. They owned the brand. Then Walt Disney World opened in 1971, eclipsing even Disneyland, and the momentum just continued. Disney World was wildly successful, but eventually it became apparent to Disney that they were losing kids at the age of 13 or 14, because 20 years ago, Disney wasn't cool when you were 15 or 16 because it was Bambi and Cinderella and all that other stuff. So Disney set out in the 1990s as a corporate strategy to win teenagers back, to extend the brand, if you will. Movies got broader in their appeal without violating the fundamental trust. You know, you don't go to a Universal movie, you don't go to an MGM movie, but you do go to a Disney movie. They were careful not to violate that. Disney musicals were invented, which had an appeal beyond the 10-year-old. Disney bought Pixar and Marvel. Disney World became known for rides that were as much about falling elevators as they were about spinning teacups. And so it became more exciting and more of a place where a teenager would go. So they were able to extend the brand without losing the core brand, but the fact is that demographically anyway, the Disney brand has dramatically stretched its appeal, and that was very, very methodical. There was nothing accidental about that. And just to sort of prove my point, I love this statistic. This is sort of off message, but I just like the statistic. Walt Disney World, this is 2 years ago, I don't know if it's still true, but Walt Disney World is the most popular honeymoon destination in the United States. So not only do people remember it, but they remember it fondly enough to go back and enjoy it again. So Disney was able to broaden its appeal, and it was a strategy that worked. It worked both for Disney as a company. It also worked for Orlando as a place. And I think in my analogy here, Disney is like music, and I'm comparing Nashville to Orlando, and I think that's a sort of a fair comparison. You've got a brand here in music that is extraordinary. There are probably 20 cities around the world right now trying to figure out how to steal it from you. But I get a sense from talking to people that you're concerned about it and wish it were more. But it is an extraordinary example of something to build on and something that can take you where you want it to take you. I'm going to give you an example again from Orlando. The University of Central Florida, which is part of the University of Florida system, is an enormous school. It has, I think, 90,000 students in Central Florida. They made a partnership early on with Disney and also Universal. Disney and Universal both moved animation departments to Orlando and built them there. And they then put together a partnership with the University of Central Florida to train animators and to give them, particularly in the new world, the computer technology that they needed in order to really be prosperous, successful employees. Well, the University of Central Florida took that technology, which basically Disney and Universal paid for, and very smartly built that into a simulation technology that now has all kinds of other applications. They partnered with the United States government and the Air Force at Cape Canaveral, and they've done all kinds of other things. So here's an example of taking something that was a part of the core of the Orlando brand, if you will, which was Disney and animation and so on and so forth, and figuring out how to stretch it beyond what it was just by being creative and being smart. So the strategic question, I guess, for you is, how do you do the same thing? You know, what's your version of simulation technology? What is there in the essence of the brand that is Nashville that can be built and stretched and pushed to take you to other places? I don't pretend to have the answer to that, but I think it's an interesting question, and I sort of like the analogy. Most successful cities are those whose political leadership view themselves not only as public servants, but also view their cities through the lens of the private sector. I think that's clearly true of your mayor. The secret is, how do you use each other in all the good senses of the word in order to grow for your mutual benefit?